Hello, this is Dr. Katherine Albrecht, broadcasting from my new studio. I'm delighted to be joined by an old friend who I haven't seen in quite some time. She's been really busy and doing wonderful things. Twila Brase is my guest this hour. She's a registered nurse, a public health nurse, and she is the president and co-founder of the Citizens Council for Health Freedom. And welcome, Twila. Thanks for coming on with me.
Well, it is great to be here. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah, we haven't spoken. I think it's been 7, 8 years since we last spoke, and a lot has been happening, not all of it good. We actually last spoke before the COVID pandemic had happened, and I know that probably kept you really busy. What was your organization doing during COVID, and what did you find in terms of the things we have been fighting for with regard to health freedom?
Well, I just want to start out by saying that it's kind of funny because COVID, when you think about time and the passage of time, you always have to calculate COVID in there. You have to
Yeah.
remember, did that happen before COVID or after? It's like this, I don't know, it's like this either big time or collapsed time, and you're trying to figure out how much time actually really passed. But 18 years before COVID, we tried to stop the Model State Emergency Health Powers Act that was put out by the CDC, and they had spent 3 years working on this thing. They wanted to get all of the states to pass it, and I think it was introduced in 40 states and passed in whole or in part in 20 states. And really, as soon as COVID struck, I thought, this is this is what's going to happen. All the things that we fought for, we fought against, or that we
Right.
fought to stop. We did get some wins. We got in Minnesota, they couldn't do mandatory vaccination, mandatory examination, testing, treatment, all this kind of stuff that they wanted to be able to do as soon as a emergency was declared. We got that out of the law. And well, it's still in there, but they had to have consent. So, but when COVID struck, I thought this entire thing that we fought against, and we could only make a few little changes, and it's going to come, it's going to work. And we saw it in action. We saw it in color. We saw all of those mandates and all of those lockdowns and all of those restrictions and all of that power, and how the health department was really empowered, and the governor was empowered, and the legislature was not. And we saw all that in the bill as it was being passed in Minnesota. And so it's like, as soon as it happened, I felt like, 18 years before, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I didn't know quite the extent, and I certainly didn't plan for anything beyond a few weeks. And when I was
No.
asked to speak at a conference called Flattening the Curve, and I think they asked me in like April, early April, and I thought, well, that's funny. I'll say yes, but we'll be done with this by then.
Oh, didn't we
I was
wish?
so wrong.
Didn't we wish? That went on forever. So did you kind of feel like a temptation to say, I told you so? Like, this
A
is what I was
temptation.
warning you about beforehand. Yeah. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of satisfaction in those I told you so's. It really is a sad moment when people go, oh, this is what we wanted to avoid. I think probably in most people's lifetimes, that is the number one event where we learned that we really don't have health freedom. I mean, I was in Los Angeles at that time, and I'll tell you, there was locked down to the point where we couldn't even walk our dog down the street. I mean, we were locked down, and the wildfires hit that summer too. So we also had it was so smoky, and we were just stuck in it, just stuck indoors with all the smoke coming. It was awful. Awful. So, well, definitely health freedom, I think, has been a big issue, and hopefully more people are aware of it now that we've had it stripped away from us through that whole awful experience with COVID. Tell me, what is, in terms of your concerns right now, what do you think is the biggest thing threatening the future of the freedom of our ability to make choices regarding health?
I was going to say that there have been a lot of silver linings in COVID. You
Hmm.
mean you
Okay,
wouldn't kind of think
I'm
so,
ready for one. Good. Let's hear the good news.
right? Well, one of the biggest one is how they discovered who and what the health department is, how they discovered the power of public health. There were just so many people that actually switched their parties because of what happened
Oh,
with COVID. There's a lot of people who discovered that all the control that's happening in the hospital and in the doctor's office, and now they're afraid of the doctors, they're afraid of the hospitals, and they understand what's been going on the entire time. But it was all unveiled because we have had government treatment protocols and big health treatment protocols and rationing, and they didn't know it. And they also thought they really believed in vaccines. And now they don't so much believe in vaccines. And now we know much more about how there
That's
wasn't
been huge.
protection.
That has absolutely been huge. Here in Michigan, there is a push to even make a lot of things optional and make it easier for people to opt out in schools and such because there's just been such horrible fallout from that COVID vaccine. So,
And
well,
even,
let me,
I
yeah,
was
go
going to say,
ahead.
just even look at all what parents discovered was happening in the schools. And then so many parents took their children out and they're now in private schools or they're in homeschooling or they're somewhere where they're not being indoctrinated. It was like an 11% increase in homeschooling. So I mean
Really?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
really substantial.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that really did come down to this. For the first time in my lifetime, this idea that the government would actually say, you must, for public health, you must do these things to your body. We are going to require these things. And the mask mandates were bad enough that you must stay home, you can't go out, you can't do certain things. But then when, in order to travel, in order to keep certain jobs, people had to get vaccinated. And now we're seeing the awful fallout from it. I think it really does make us aware that all it's going to take is just one event, and all of this freedom that we take for granted could be stripped from us. One of the issues that you and I've worked on in the past is Real ID, and we were railing against it before it even, when it was a glimmer in lawmakers' eyes. And of course, now it's here. We have Real ID, and I know that you have continued the struggle against that and the fight against it. What's the latest in the Real ID fight?
Well, the latest is that we are leading the charge against it, and so we have a three-pronged attack. And I should say what Real ID is, but I'll say what
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's define it for listeners because they may not even know it at this point. It's been a while.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll define it first and then I'll talk about our three-prong attack. So, Real ID is a national ID, or you could think about it maybe more accurately as a federal ID. So the
Mm.
federal government has hijacked the state DMVs, and so people think they've got a state driver's license and they don't. They have a federal ID under federal control, and the federal government is letting the states use it as a driver's license. But it is no longer a driver's license. It is a federal ID under federal control. And it will lead to a national surveillance system for several reasons. The DMVs testified to Congress that they intend to digitize it, put it on our phones, and have real-time remote access to it. In addition to that, what the law says is it's not limited to just federal buildings, nuclear facilities, and commercial flight. No, what the law says is, and for any other purposes that the Secretary of Homeland Security shall determine. This means that the Secretary can do things like decide, well, you know what? We need to have a real ID before you can access healthcare because, after all, 47% of healthcare is paid for by a government, state, local, federal. Or it could be you need a real ID to buy a gun, or you need a real ID to get married, or open up a bank account, or rent a car, or buy a home. You name it. There is no limit in the law to what they could require a real ID for. And then
Now,
the
other countries have really burdensome national IDs. I mean, we have this image from Hollywood, I guess, of your papers, please, and well, not the please, the gun and your paper. Do you foresee something like that happening here, where you couldn't even cross from, say, California into Arizona without being demanded to present some form of identification, so they know you're not an illegal immigrant or you're not a criminal or a fugitive, or who knows, maybe you didn't get your COVID jab on time.
I think it's entirely possible. If you look at what's happening at the states, there's the red states now and the blue states, right?
Mm.
And so I could actually foresee maybe more than anyone, the red states deciding you had to have a real ID to make sure that the illegals would not get into their into their
Mm-hmm.
state. Of course, the illegals
Think of
won't
that.
actually be stopped by the real ID. For one thing, you don't even have to be a citizen to get a real ID. And secondly, if you have an administration like the Biden administration, they won't care. They'll just have real IDs being given to whomever. And the thing here is that the states have acquiesced to the federal government. They did not initially do so. Initially, when this came out in 2005, and then the rule came out in 2008, about 30 states said no. They realized it as the federal commandeering of the state. They realized it as an unfunded mandate. They realized it as a violation of the Fourth and 10th Amendment, and they said no. And so it just sat there. And until Obama from the rooftops shouted that you won't be able to fly without a real ID. And that was the end of 2015. So that so once that happened, the national media picked it up. And then people started to call their state legislators and say, fix this. Get us real ID compliant because I need to fly. I have a winter home to go to. I have
Yeah,
children
they
to.
threatened the states. I remember that. They said, oh, if you live in a state that hasn't complied, well, everybody else is going to be able to travel, but you won't be able to get on an airplane, can't go into a courthouse. I remember that. Yeah. And it was, and so they really did put the screws to the public to demand it, which is such an irony that they would, and so clever actually that they would come up with such an awful diabolical way to get people to ask for their own chains, right? I
Of
mean,
course, they did it with COVID. They did it with real ID. So scare the people and the people will comply. The people will ask for the thing that you want them to do. The so-called Karens, right?
mm.
Just demanded that you be in a mask, even though you were, in the open air or if you aren't vaccinated, you're not going to be able to see your children. So these are the things that the bureaucrats wanted. And if you scare people enough, they will be the police force for the government, mandating that, their neighbors, their family, their friends all comply. So, that's how it worked with Real ID. And then so now all the states have complied. They have 100% compliance, or at least
Okay.
they've deemed, we don't know for sure that every state has actually passed a law. We're kind of finding out that that might not be true, but they have been deemed compliant. And maybe it's just that the DMVs are going out on their own and just complying with Real ID without a state law behind them. That's what we think is happening with some of the states. Okay, but what in the latest push to Real ID, what they want is 100% card compliance. So they want all the IDs and all of the driver's licenses in each state to be Real ID compliant, which means that individuals have to comply, or the states don't let you even get a standard state driver's license.
And what does it mean to comply? Are the cards themselves physically different for
They
people who
are.
do or don't comply?
They are. So the real IDs have a star or a
Mm.
flag. And there's really only Washington State that has a flag. Every other state has a star of some sort. But it also has a biometric photo. So it is a digital photo so that they can do facial recognition technology, find you in a crowd, find you, identify you, etc. Right? That is one of the requirements of Real ID. And so I like to have people think about biometric identification and this whole biometric mandate this way. It is that the government has claimed a right to collect and catalog the coordinates of your body for their control and surveillance. And that's what's going on with Real ID. So you've got digitization, you've got biometric control, you've got the plan to have remote access, and then the idea that it could be expanded far beyond flight so that it becomes a domestic passport within the country. And as you were saying, could it be required to go from state to state? I'm guessing that would be found unconstitutional. They'd have to have a gazillion border guards. I can't kind of imagine it. But at some point, if there was administrations that were Marxists and communists and all sorts of things, the whole thing could be turned in that direction.
So what can we do? Is there anything at this point, or is it just a done deal and get it or die? Can you say no to it still as a citizen? You could still say no, but then you can't fly, right?
Nope. Nope. That's part of the
So,
lie. So, you can't fly is a lie. That's one of the things
oh,
that people know. There are 16 different TSA acceptable identification cards in order to fly. Real ID is one of them, a passport or a passport card
ah,
are others. There's military cards, there's VA medical cards, there's permanent resident cards. There's 16 different ones. But once May 7th came around, which was the supposed deadline, which really wasn't a deadline, suddenly the TSA had on their website that, you should watch this page because it could change. They could
mm.
decide that certain things are not available to fly. But here's the fact of the matter. There's no law that requires you to have an ID to fly. And people don't know this. There's no
I
law.
once forgot mine and I learned that. I actually got to the airport and I had left my purse in the taxi and I had to get on this flight. And that's back when there was taxis, not Ubers. And that's how I learned they actually had alternative methods for me to get on the plane. I had some other stuff with me and I don't even remember what all we did, but I did get on that airplane. It's amazing. Yeah, so and I think this notion that you don't have to have a real ID, I mean that's blowing people's minds because I actually, and with all the work I've done on it, I haven't done anything on it in years, but I thought it was now a mandate that we were required. I know they have the big warnings up, if you don't have it by this date, you won't be able to fly. But
It's
yeah,
a
I didn't.
lie.
Yeah, interesting.
Lie.
So a passport now is a passport also used in that same biometric, with the same identifiers to pick you out of a crowd, or a passport's a different technology or a different office controlling them?
So I do believe it is a biometric passport. I mean, sorry, a biometric photo in the passport. However, the difference is that they are not going to require you to have a passport to do all the things that they want to require you to have to
Oh,
with the real ID. And if they can, it was Thomas Massey, Congressman Massey, who said, until everybody has a real ID, you won't understand everything that they plan to do with it. And I think that that is true. And because
oh,
you know that the sky is the limit according to the law itself as to what it could be required for, you understand that potentially here with the digital and the biometric and the, no limit at all to what it could be required for. What we're setting up here is the foundation for a social credit system in America, much like in China, where you saw
China.
during COVID, everything on their phone, all of their lockdowns were controlled by their phone. The government knew exactly where they were. They could or could not buy things according to, the digital phone that they had. And so that's what we're setting up here. And we can't afford to have this as Americans. We can't afford to have this if we want to have a free country. So Real ID is not a done deal. And like I said, we have a three-prong attack. So
So
first,
how do people support? Yeah, how do people support what you're doing? Tell us a little bit about your organization, how people can get involved, how they can take advantage of the resources, and learn more.
yeah. So first of all, go to refuserealid.org.
Okay. I'll write it down.
Refuserealid.org, and all the instructions are there for individuals to both refuse it and to get rid of it. So they're really important is to get rid of Real ID if you have it in the states that will let you get rid of it. We have to turn around the trajectory that they have for getting
Hmm.
everybody in 2 years.
So if you have one, you can get out. You can
Depends
you can
on your
actually
state.
rescind it.
Depends on your state.
Okay.
And so we're gathering stories from the different states. In Indiana, once you have it, they won't let you switch. There are 5 states that only give you a real ID. They don't even give standard IDs anymore, and they're all Republican. Texas,
Mm,
Georgia, Florida, Wyoming, and Mississippi. And people in those states should actually ask their governor and their members of the legislature to switch that, to say, basically, I
yeah.
see what's being set up here, a whole digital control, biometric control system, you know,
Right.
controlled by the
And you
federal,
would think Republicans would, well, but they're so big on this immigrant issue that, yeah,
but
um,
it doesn't even stop the immigrants, right? So the
yeah, no,
immigrants,
it
a lot
doesn't.
of states, 19 states give immigrants driver's licenses. So
Yeah, it doesn't do you much good. All right, well, Twyla, we're coming to the end here. I'm gonna give out your website again. I see it right behind you.
Yes,
I'll let you say it again.
it's
Yeah,
cchfreedom.org,
CC.
cchfreedom.org. And I would ask people to also tell their legislators in every state to get their state out of Real ID. At least 10 states are moving in that direction with at least proposals and introduce legislation. So, act and engage now.
Well, thank you for staying involved in this issue and giving me an update that I very much needed. I actually have a real ID because I thought I had to. So I will get that fixed. I'm going to use your resources and see if I can get out of it in my state. Well, thank you so much, Twyla, for coming on my very first maiden podcast here at our new studio. And I'm looking forward to getting you on my radio show so we can talk about all the other things we want to catch up on. So thank you, Twyla. Many blessings.
Thanks.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Bye bye.